Welcome to the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast.
So, it's the month of love. Romance, longing, devotion, and all of the beautiful, messy things that come along with it. Love is arguably the most central, most powerful force in stories across the world. From the very first myths ever told to the stories that we're still writing today, love has always been right at the heart of it all. Romantic love, familial love, longing, obsession, heartbreak, whatever form it takes, there is just something about love that makes us tick. It's no wonder artists, writers and creatives have been endlessly inspired by it for centuries, if not millennia. So what is it about love? We need it in our real lives, of course, and we want to see that reflected back to us in the stories that we consume. Think about how many quotes live rent-free in our minds, from Shakespeare to Disney to song lyrics that we all somehow know by heart. If an alien landed on Earth tomorrow, I think one of the first things they would figure out is this: humans love love, even when it hurts. In fact, especially when it hurts. Because for all of the stories and the songs and the films about love, very few of them are about smooth sailing. Heartbreak is something most of us have experienced in one way or another, and yet we don't shy away from it. We seek it out in stories in order to recognise ourselves. There is so much comfort in knowing that we're not alone. This brings us to our first story today. A Mortal Breaks Aphrodite's Heart by Datsyk. When we talk about love in storytelling, we have to talk about how often it's been personified across different cultures and traditions. Perhaps one of the most famous embodiments of all is Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love, lust, beauty, pleasure, passion and desire. We imagine Aphrodite as untouchable. She's the most beautiful of the gods, the ultimate authority on love. But what happens when her heart gets broken? In this story, Aphrodite is reimagined in a modern-day setting where the balance, or should I say imbalance, between Olympus and the mortals still exists. This is a version of Aphrodite you might not expect. She is powerful, but she is also yearning. Let's hear from Datsyk, the author, as she gives a brief introduction to her story.
I wrote this short story for Flame Tree's Aphrodite collection. Writing this was my chance to explore Aphrodite's story in our age, where the world is so increasingly secular and the domain she's known for best, love, has really been digitized. So at its most base level, this is a reimagining of the Aphrodite and Hephaestus marriage. But really, writing this was a way for me to delve into the ethics surrounding the life of somebody like Aphrodite in this big year 2025-26. It's a question about a woman who's looking for companionship, but is also sort of a politician, a person with a portfolio of issues that are deeply relevant and widespread today.
And now, A Mortal Breaks Aphrodite's Heart, narrated by Sabrina Robinson.
A Mortal Breaks Aphrodite's Heart by Datsyk. Aphrodite is heartbroken, and all anyone is talking about is her brand. She is biting her nails into ragged, uneven moons, tasting blood while they make a fresh pot of coffee. She is thinking about the pain of this, how it cannot be outthought, outignored, or even outfucked. It is something gritty and perseverant that laughs from its perch high in her chest when she says, "I am done with feeling you." Her PR team says this is no problem. They hand her collagen face masks and reapply her makeup and tattoo her eyebrows on, which is all the rage apparently. They erase her aching, her longing, and her wishing with brushstrokes and careful wording. They want to confirm they have the mortal's NDA on file. In the beginning, Aphrodite used to ask why. Couldn't she just have this day off? Doesn't she deserve to stuff her face with marshmallows and watch at least 2 seasons of Gilmore Girls back to back? Pity shadowed her team lead's eyes, and Aphrodite thought, thank the gods. She was going to go home and order takeout and eat Chinese food with a fork and listen to Natalie and Berglia on repeat. But then he said, "Babe, if the team's catch-all for the entire mortal population, find out you didn't want it to end, they're going to start wondering if love is even real." Then he handed her cucumber slices to reduce her under-eye swelling. She overheard the team rolling their eyes in the lunchroom afterwards. "We don't take days off when we have a breakup. Work with your fucking broken heart like the rest of us." What a diva. To this day, she finds this extremely embarrassing. These clips play in her mind often, reminding her it is better to be a doll in their hands, a plaything on which to apply copious rouge, than it is to be unlovable. Now, she sits at the table, listening while they debate how to frame this breakup. Should they call it a fling? Should they suggest it was an affair of passion that burned bright before it sizzled? Either way, it is imperative people understand it was Aphrodite who pulled the trigger. She must be seen as beautiful, confident, and laughing at a joke no one else has heard, looking nothing like the goddess who cried all weekend and wished for a mortal to take her back. And you should find someone new, quick. This they all agreed on, nodding vigorously around the table. The ache inside of her amplifies. It almost throbs. It's so big her ribs rearrange in her chest to make room for the grief. But she is not a diva. Diva is not conducive to the type of love she wishes to manifest in the world. So she says, "Of course." Who could it be? They muse amongst themselves. Do you have a vision? Her head spins. Her vision is that the mortal will appear at her door tonight, having run to her in the pouring rain to say, "I've made a terrible mistake. My love, forgive me." After, they'll lie in bed and eat chocolate-covered orange peels, whispering, "I missed you," giggling about the annoying infomercial jingle they both have stuck in their heads. She closes her eyes. The blackness is so thick and far-reaching she could almost fall asleep. Maybe not another mortal, the table decides, while she tries to unstick her tongue from the roof of her mouth. They put their little bobbleheads together, and she tries to listen while they scheme. But there's a ringing in the ears that sounds like the earth, how it cried when it was young. She loves dating mortals. She is no different from the other Olympians in this, but she feels very virtuous about it, falling in love with mutual respect. No deception, no lies. None of the things antithetical to love. Once, stirring honey into her tea, Hera observed mildly, "It's still manipulative." Aphrodite was hot off the heels of an affair, trying to recover. But Hera's eyes gleamed. She has never found a knife she won't twist. Your power dynamic is off. Mortals will date you just because they're afraid you'll smite their bloodline. Aphrodite retorted, "Well, I've never turned anyone into a cow to keep someone interested in me." Because it was easier than admitting that Hera was right. Even in this body, even on this earthly plane, she is a goddess. If she sets her sights on someone, she could easily become the object of their desire. She could slide her gender along a scale to match their sexuality. She could wear any mask, any person or creature, or, God forbid, inanimate object. But she does not. She's chasing true love, which doesn't hold up under illusion. She adores mortals earnestly. She's fascinated by them. Their ever-evolving beauty, from smooth cheeks to laughter lines, from dark hair to wispy silver. She loves the weight they place on time, how they value their finite lives. She is curious, watching them live as if they might die tomorrow, or might never die at all. They look behind them constantly, or only ahead, with blinders on. They are so varied as they hunt for meaning in their lovely, precious purposelessness. At the table, the unlovable mortals on her PR team turn to her. What are your thoughts on Hephaestus? How can she explain it to them? She's had many lifetimes for dalliances with immortals, but they have grown stale in their sameness, their ageless wisdom. Mortality complicates everything, but to bite into it, it is the freshest fruit, the juiciest berry, the richest meat. Olympians taste to her like canned preserves, pickled things and dried apricots. She has lost her taste for them. But she nods and says, he's fine. Sitting across from him the following evening, she tears her cocktail napkin into fine shreds while he finishes an email on his phone. I'm really sorry, he keeps saying, but the email gets longer and longer and longer. She watches his thumbs for a while. Like the rest of him, they're thick and square, decorated with coarse dark hair, but loses interest eventually. Her eyes glaze over to the window behind him, where rain smears a red light all across the street. She met the mortal on an app. She felt it was her duty to ensure that love could be found there despite the cynicism and frustration she saw. She found it in a pale, freckled woman with a high forehead and mouse-brown hair, whose first photo was of her in a plant nursery with a cart full of creepers. Her profile read, "Yet another day of buying twee things in flea markets, procrastinating on my PhD, and lamenting the cost of grapes in this country. Looking for a relationship with someone curious, feminist, and pro-plaid, who won't mind getting texts from a night owl about the meaning of life, or ceramic cats." Aphrodite honors love fully. She bought the mortal flowers every week, replacing the last bouquet just as its petals began to wilt. She texted her, "I'm thinking of you," when she was, which was often. When she heard a song with a poignant lyric, when she saw two mourning doves picking apart a pretzel in a back alley, when she saw anything vaguely heart-shaped, when the air was light with the scent of fresh-baked bread, when the stars were bright and the moon was full, when a candle was burning low, when she was lonely or when she wasn't. The mortal said, "You're so sweet, Daita, but I don't need all this." And she said it so softly that Aphrodite's heart melted. Still, she didn't know how to stop. She is moved when she is in love, and she speaks all love languages fluently, equally, loudly. The next conversation was different. "Daita, this is too much." But she still didn't know how to stop. "I'm so sorry," Hephaestus says, and she realizes he is done, finally. She replies, "It's fine," though it's not. Only Olympians can spurn Olympians like this. A mortal would never dare, fearing they might be transformed into a pigeon or a worm or something else easy to kill. Still, Hephaestus is very sorry and says as much one more time before explaining in a wishy-washy way, "That volcano in Iceland, you know." She shrugs, uncommittally. She knows about the volcano in Iceland. She reads the news like everyone else. But she's afraid if she appears overconfident in his domain, he will hate her. The media keep calling, and it's so... He takes a very long drink of the cocktail he's ordered. His nostrils flare as he does. His drink is pungent, cinnamony. "Well, she says. Aphrodite does not wish to relate, though she does to a degree. When she gets media calls, it's usually because there has been a widely publicized domestic violence incident, and they would like her to explain how love could look like this. How could she make it so? "That must be difficult," she says diplomatically. A part of her soul is already leaving her body. She feels it evaporating into the bar and out the window and into the rain, where it is cool and lovely, and she is with the birds. She misses evenings with the mortal. The mortal would take Aphrodite's hand in her own and kiss every dainty knuckle like a prayer before they ate. It was a form of worship she took for granted. "Sorry," he says for the fourth time. "I don't want to bore you." His shoulders slump. "I was actually really happy when your office called." His earnestness yanks her soul back from the fog. Really? He nods, and his shaggy hair bounces on his strong brow. You're always so quiet in meetings. I feel like I don't know anything about you. He's wrong there. She hasn't always been quiet. At their round table, she used to advocate for her people. She used to argue what gets them out of bed in the morning. It's love. Love that rouses them. Love for a bright morning and the people they meet under the sun. But then Achilles would say their health, and Hermes would say work. And she would say, but what motivates them? What really motivates them? What force could be strong enough that it unfolds them from the safety of their nest and lures them into the wild world beyond? For what would they sacrifice their time and their comfort? Then Plutus would say money, and Artemis would say wisdom, and all of Aphrodite's points would dissolve, like the sea foam that made her. There's not a lot to know, she says. Time with the mortals has taught her humility. Sometimes it's hard to remember her as she once was, a goddess rising from the sea, standing above the waves amidst circling warships, their sails cracking from the winds, their hulls snapping in the grip of a many-armed creature reaching from the depths. People forget she can be bloody, since no one wars in the ocean anymore. Though, with increasing regularity, she's getting calls about whales attacking yachts. Hephaestus shakes his head. Pardon my Latin, but there's no fucking way that's true. Her cheeks burn. Are you so lonely that you're falling prey to a man's flattery? A god's flattery? Surely you know better. No, she's tickled. Her stomach flutters. I mean it, you have the best portfolio of all of us. Really? Absolutely. You really get to know people as people. Aphrodite flinches. The butterflies in her tummy dissolve into dust. She's spent centuries reading between the lines of comments like this. He's making her work small. But she's more than love letters and chocolate. The mortal understood that. Before she can stop herself, she's counting on her fingers. I get media calls about domestic violence, incels, and kids dating AI. She takes another finger. The internet is blaming me for the gay agenda, as if we weren't all gay since before they were born. She lifts a third finger. And like every week, my team lobbies to legalize sex work. Every week. Hephaestus opens his mouth, then closes it again. And now that she's riled up, she can't quite seem to stop herself. While you all kill, fuck, marry, whoever you want, I have to go on fake dates. She gestures viciously between them to make people think I'd rather have fun than a future. Anything she had said to humble him is forgotten. Fake dates? Confusion creases his forehead and spreads to the corners of his mouth, flattening his lips into a guarded line. Her anger stutters. What did you think this was? I didn't know. They just asked for a meeting. You think this is how I take a meeting? She lifts her hand, gaudy with bubble-hearted acrylic nails, and indicates to herself. Her skin-tight ruby red velvet dress, her lipstick thick as blood. I guess. She stares at him. It has been many years since she threw a drink at someone, but she's tempted. Finally, she sighs and gulps her cocktail. The cherry liqueur makes her taste buds pucker and her teeth hurt. She sets the glass down hard. A hairline fracture appears in the stem. Unbelievable. Even as she steams in her seat, part of her wants to apologize. Sorry that this meeting is tabloid fodder, a meaningless headline designed to show the world my heart has never been anything but whole. Sorry for wasting your time, for assuming you knew what this was. Hephaestus has been staring at the table, looking down with a slightly horrified expression. She almost dreads him ending his silence. She sits on a ledge, waiting, and he must be careful. The wrong words will unleash her, and she will soak something in poisoned blood for him to wear around his shoulders till it eats through his skin. I'm sorry, he says finally. You're not what I thought you were. She blinks. No one has ever apologized for that. Her work is frivolous to the other gods, and she knows it. They have temples and shrines, offerings of milk and honey, where entire villages kneel and pray for bountiful harvests and another year of peace. Meanwhile, Aphrodite has altars raised by teenage girls who proffer restaurant breath mints and beg to be noticed by a K-pop star from their dreams. She wishes this were not a point for comparison. Worship to most is a form of commerce, payment for a duty done. But over time, prostitution has been added to her portfolio, and surely she knows the difference between love and business. She wishes love in all its forms on everyone, those who don't ask for it just as much as those who do. It is not her right to profit from what humankind deserves unilaterally. You're right, she says, turning her nose up. I'm not. Sensing the fight has left her, Hephaestus's features relax. She's surprised he isn't leaving. Why are we on a fake date? Aphrodite sags in her chair. Because someone broke my heart. Her voice cracks with the effort of saying it plainly. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to hear about it? Their eyes meet over the table, both a little surprised. I do, he says. Tell me about the real Aphrodite.
This story is so deeply human, despite the fact that we are listening to the perspective of a goddess. Even Aphrodite is drawn to the vulnerability and authenticity of mortal love. We are reminded that love involves risk, and yet we choose connection even if it might hurt. If you'd like to read more modern retellings like this, you can find them in the anthology Aphrodite, a gorgeous collection of contemporary writing from our Myths, Gods and Immortals series. Our second story explores a love that persists against all odds. It's a familiar fairy tale for many of us, especially if you grew up with the stories of Hans Christian Andersen. This one tells the tale of a little toy man who falls hopelessly in love with a delicate paper ballerina. Have you guessed it yet? Taken from our collection of Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, this is The Brave Tin Soldier, read by B.
The Brave Tin Soldier. There were once 25 tin soldiers, who were all brothers, for they had been made out of the same old tin spoon. They shouldered arms and looked straight before them, and wore a splendid uniform, red and blue. The first thing in the world that they ever heard were the words, "Tin soldiers!" uttered by a little boy who clapped his hands with delight when the lid of the box in which they lay was taken off. They were given to him for a birthday present, and he stood at the table to set them up. The soldiers were all exactly alike, except one who only had one leg. He had been left to the last, and there was not enough of the melted tin to finish him, so they made him to stand firmly on one leg, and this caused him to be very remarkable. The table on which the tin soldiers stood was covered with other playthings, but the most attractive to the eye was a pretty little paper castle. Through the small windows the rooms could be seen. In front of the castle a number of little trees surrounded a piece of looking-glass, which was intended to represent a transparent lake. Swans, made of wax, swam on the lake and were reflected in it. All this was very pretty, but the prettiest of all was a tiny little lady who stood at the open door of the castle. She also was made of paper, and she wore a dress of clear muslin, with a narrow blue ribbon over her shoulders, just like a scarf. In front of these was fixed a glittering tinsel rose, as large as her whole face. The little lady was a dancer, and she stretched out both her arms and raised one of her legs so high that the tin soldier could not see it at all, and he thought that she, like himself, had only one leg. "That is the wife for me," he thought. "But she is too grand and lives in a castle, while I only have a box to live in. 25 of us all together. That is no place for her." Still, I must try and make her acquaintance." Then he laid himself at full length on the table behind a snuff-box that stood upon it, so that he could peep at the little delicate lady, who continued to stand on one leg without losing her balance. When evening came, the other tin soldiers were all placed in the box, and the people of the house went to bed. Then the playthings began to have their own games together, to pay visits, to have sham fights, and to give balls. The tin soldiers rattled in their box. They wanted to get out and join the amusements, but they could not open the lid. The nutcrackers played at leapfrog, and the pencil jumped about the table. There was such a noise that the canary woke up and began to talk, and in poetry too. Only the tin soldier and the dancer remained in their places. She stood on tiptoe, with her legs stretched out as firmly as he did on his one leg. He never took his eyes from her even for a moment. The clock struck 12, and with a bounce up sprang the lid of the snuff-box. But instead of snuff, there jumped a little black goblin, for the snuff-box was a toy puzzle. "Tin soldier," said the goblin, "don't wish for what does not belong to you." But the tin soldier pretended not to hear. "Very well, wait till tomorrow then," said the goblin. When the children came in the next morning, they placed the tin soldier in the window. Now, whether it was the goblin who did it, or the draught, it is not known, but the window flew open and out fell the tin soldier, heels over head, from the 3rd story into the street beneath. It was a terrible fall, for he came head downwards, his helmet and his bayonet stuck between the flagstones, and his one leg up in the air. The servant maid and the little boy went downstairs directly to look for him, but he was nowhere to be seen, although once they nearly trod upon him. If he had called out, "Here I am," it would have been all right, but he was too proud to cry out for help while he wore a uniform. Presently it began to rain, and the drops fell faster and faster, till there was a heavy shower. When it was over, 2 boys happened to pass by, and one of them said, "Look, there is a tin soldier. He ought to have a boat to sail in." So they made a boat out of newspaper and placed the tin soldier in it, and sent him sailing down the gutter, while the 2 boys ran by the side of it and clapped their hands. Good gracious, what large waves arose in that gutter, and how fast the stream rolled on! For the rain had been very heavy. The paper boat rocked up and down and turned itself round, sometimes so quickly that the tin soldier trembled. Yet he remained firm, his countenance did not change. He looked straight before him and shouldered his musket. Suddenly the boat shot under a bridge which formed part of a drain, and then it was as dark as the tin soldier's box. "Where am I going now?" thought he. "This is the black goblin's fault, I am sure. Ah, well, if the little lady were only here with me in the boat, I should not care for any darkness." Suddenly there appeared a great water rat who lived in the drain. "Have you a passport?" asked the rat. "Give it to me at once." But the tin soldier remained silent and held his musket tighter than ever. The boat sailed on, and the rat followed it. How he did gnash his teeth and cry out to the bits of wood and straw, "Stop him! Stop him! He has not paid a toll! He has not shown his pass!" But the stream rushed on stronger and stronger. The tin soldier could already see daylight shining where the arch ended. Then he heard a roaring sound, quite terrible enough to frighten the bravest man. At the end of the tunnel the drain fell into a large canal, over a steep place, which made it as dangerous for him as a waterfall would be to us. He was too close to it to stop, and the poor tin soldier could only hold himself as stiffly as possible, without moving an eyelid to show that he was not afraid. The boat whirled round 3 or 4 times, and then filled with water to the very edge. Nothing could save it from sinking. He now stood up to his neck in water, while deeper and deeper sank the boat, and the paper became soft and loose with the wet, till at last the water closed over the soldier's head. He thought of that elegant little dancer whom he should never see again, and the words of the song sounded in his ear. "Farewell, warrior, ever brave, drifting onward to thy grave." Then the paper boat fell to pieces, and the soldier sank into the water, and immediately afterwards was swallowed up by a great fish. Oh, how dark it was inside the great fish, a great deal darker than in the tunnel, and narrower too, but the tin soldier continued firm, and lay at full length, shouldering his musket. The fish swam to and fro, making the most wonderful movements, but at last he became quite still. After a while, a flash of lightning seemed to pass through him, and then the daylight approached, and a voice cried out, "I declare, here is the tin soldier!" The fish had been caught, taken to the market, and sold to the cook, who took him into the kitchen and cut him open with a large knife. She picked up the soldier and held him by the waist between her finger and thumb, and carried him into the room. They were all anxious to see this wonderful soldier who had travelled about inside a fish, but he was not at all proud. They placed him on the table, and how many things curious do happen in the world. There he was, in the very same room from the window in which he had fallen. There were the same children, the same playthings standing on the table, and the pretty castle with the elegant little dancer at the door. She still balanced herself on one leg and held up the other, so she was as firm as himself. It touched the tin soldier so much to see her that he almost wept in tears, but he kept them back. He only looked at her, and they both remained silent. Presently, one of the little boys took up the tin soldier and threw him into the stove. He had no reason for doing so. Therefore, it must have been the fault of the black goblin who lived in the snuff box. The flames lighted up the tin soldier as he stood. The heat was very terrible, but whether it proceeded from the real fire or from the fire of his love, he could not tell. Then he could see that the bright colours were faded from his uniform, but whether they had been washed off during his journey, or from the effects of his sorrow, no one could say. He looked up at the little lady, and she looked at him. He felt himself melting away, but he still remained firm with his gun on his shoulder. Suddenly the door of the room flew open, and the draught of air caught up the little dancer. She fluttered like a sylph right into the stove by the side of the tin soldier, and was instantly in flames, and was gone. The tin soldier melted down into a lump, and the next morning, when the maid-servant took the ashes out of the stove, she found him in the shape of a little tin heart. But of the little dancer nothing remained but the tinsel rose, which was burnt black as a cinder.
The tin soldier may be brave for all the dangers he faces on his journey, but I like to think that it's his love for the paper ballerina that makes him truly courageous and earns him his name. His devotion never wavers, even as everything around him falls apart. And while the ending is undeniably tragic, there is something very beautiful about it too. In the end, all that remains is a final symbol of love that endures even after death. So, this was something a little bit different and more heartfelt from us today. We hope that you all have a wonderful Valentine's, hopefully avoiding any unfortunate drafts. It might not be everybody's favourite holiday, but it does give us a moment each year where love takes centre stage, and it's a chance to show gratitude for the people who make our lives richer. Whether that's a partner, your parents, your friends, your pet, yes they do count, or a kind stranger, or yourself. Next week, things take a darker turn. We hope to see you then, but for now, that's goodbye.
Thanks so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Flame Tree Myth and Fiction podcast and look forward to the next episode. Do recommend it to your friends. Goodbye for now.